Shalom, my name is Yair Davidiy. I'm speaking to you from the area of Judah, the territory of Judah, in the land of Israel, in an area close by or possibly within the region or the boundaries of Bethlehem of biblical times. And today we are going to discuss the blessing of Jacob. Jacob was also known as Israel. Israel is another name for Jacob. Jacob was renamed Israel. Before he died, Jacob blessed the children of Joseph. The children of Joseph were Ephraim and Manasseh. And Manasseh was the firstborn. He was the eldest son. He should have had the major right. He should have had more of the birthright, as if to say, as was the law for the firstborn. But Yaakov, that is Israel, changed it. He switched his hands over. He placed his right hand on the head of Ephraim. So we will discuss this blessing, and we will also show that according to the literal Hebrew and the commentaries explaining exactly what happened, rabbinical commentators based on the Hebrew text explain to us that from this blessing we learn that Ephraim, that is the second son, Ephraim would be the major son. He would receive the major portion of the blessing, and he would also receive the blessing first of all. He would be the first one to receive the blessing, and Manasseh would become great after him at a later date. And we identify descendants of Ephraim as having been settled within the British Isles. That is where the descendants still are to be found amongst the British and their offshoots. Whereas within America, even though many of the Americans came from the British Isles, they came from sections of the population that were related more to Manasseh. And Manasseh gave expression to himself more within the USA than within Britain. So from a biblical perspective, the USA pertains to Manasseh. It gives expression to Manasseh. And what was prophesied concerning Ephraim and concerning Manasseh took historically and even today within contemporary affairs, still takes place and works itself out in what we see today in what goes on with the British Isles and the offshoots of the British, and also with the USA. Sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. The sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh were blessed. Joseph took his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, to Jacob. Jacob was dying. Jacob is also known as Israel. And he took them to Jacob to be blessed. Joseph placed Ephraim on his right hand and Manasseh on his left hand, and they were facing Jacob. Jacob would have the firstborn Manasseh on his right hand and Ephraim on his left hand, because Manasseh was the firstborn. But Jacob crossed his hands over. He put his left hand on the head of Manasseh and his right hand on the head of Ephraim. Notice he switched his hand over. He switched his hand over. The two sons were facing him. Manasseh was on his right hand, Ephraim on his left hand. He switched his hands over so that his left hand would be on the head of Manasseh, his right hand on the head of Ephraim. And so he blessed them. Note, his left hand is on the head of Manasseh, his right hand on the head of Ephraim. He blessed them by switching his hands over. He didn't reverse the order. He didn't tell the sons to move it, to change their positioning. Didn't move them around. He switched his hands. He crossed his hands. Now this is significant. And so we see in Genesis 48. Genesis 48, beginning from verse 13, Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand towards Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand towards Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn. He blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, my name live on them, in them, and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac. And may they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." Now when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, so he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to put to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, I know, my son. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel will bless, saying, May God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh." And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. The words concerning Ephraim, he also shall become a people, and he also shall be great, Genesis 48 verse 19, indicate that Manasseh shall be greater after Ephraim. He also, that is how it could be understood, and this is confirmed by other considerations. Note what the other considerations are. We have a famous rabbinical commentator known as the Malbim, Rabbi Meir Leibush ben Yehiel Michael Weiser, 1809 to 1879, and he says Ephraim was blessed with the right hand. The right side always indicates miraculous intervention of the Almighty. The right hand of the Almighty works wonders beyond the way of nature. Manasseh was blessed with the left hand, which indicates blessing through natural means. Both the blessings and the two means by which God rules the world will bring benefaction to Ephraim and Manasseh until their seed becomes a multitude in the midst of the earth. The greatness of Ephraim will be through quality. The greatness of Manasseh will be through quantity. Concerning quality, that is Ephraim, it sometimes happens that one man is worth an entire nation. This is a characteristic of Ephraim. The blessing of Ephraim was to come into effect immediately. On the other hand, the blessing of Manasseh would have to wait until his population grew to multitudinous number, until he should increase and multiply and grow into a great nation. The time of Manasseh would have to wait until he also shall become a people, and then he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother, that is Ephraim, shall be greater than he. Shall be greater than he. This means that Ephraim was to become great by his own merit and not due to his large population. And these words fit our identification of Ephraim with Britain and company, and Manasseh with the USA. Britain and Ephraim became powerful before the USA. The USA emerged from Ephraim. The USA became powerful and great after Britain had already existed. Britain founded, the British founded the USA, they founded the American nation. The majority of the early settlers of North America, of the USA, were from Britain. They were natives of Britain. Later others came from Europe, and they too were from the Lost End tribes, and they too may also have been descendants of Joseph, and that is something that we shall discuss later and another time. At all events, for most of its history, up until 1800 or thereabouts, England, the country of England, later was joined onto Wales and Scotland and to Ireland and to Northern Ireland. But the British Isles, especially England, had a relatively small population until about 1800. So there was a great industrial revolution and a very quick, almost miraculous explosion of population. They increased and became multiplied, but up until that time, compared to other countries in Europe, they didn't have that many people. But even so, they had always been relatively wealthy. They didn't have that many people, except before the Romans. They may have been the British Isles may have been quite populous, but then disasters came out, visited the Isles, and the population went down. And it remained relatively small compared to other nations until about the 1800s, or a little bit before then. But even though the population had been small compared to other nations, it had always been powerful. England had always been a powerful nation, a relatively wealthy nation, and they had gone to war with the more powerful nations. France was at that time the most powerful country in the world. They went to war several times, on quite a few occasions, against France and defeated France. They also went to war against Spain, the most powerful country in the world, also in its time, and they defeated Spain. They also fought against the Netherlands, which was one of the most powerful nations on the earth, and against other countries. They were a powerful nation and a wealthy nation. Long before their numbers and their industrial base gave them something to back up, gave them a natural forces, their sheer personality, national personality, made them great. And this fits the description of Ephraim, that Ephraim would become great through its own qualities, whereas the USA would become great through its natural force, its natural, the inertia of its own development would make it great. And this is what happened. The USA was created in 1776. From the very beginning it was relatively wealthy and powerful, but it didn't exert itself very much on the world scene until World Wars I and World War II. When it was almost forced to exert itself, to put its impress on the world. The USA didn't want to become a player in world affairs. They had a policy of isolation, of non-interference. They were almost the power and the force of external affairs, of external influences, as if to say, pushed it into the world scene. And this is what was described would happen with Manasseh, and this is what happened. We have another source concerning this aspect of Manasseh becoming great after Ephraim. This is Bnei Issachar, Rabbi Ephraim and Manasseh, 1783-1841, in the book known as Bnei Issachar. As we find this quoted from by a Sefer Shiptei Yisrael by Ephraim Ma'el, and he says Ephraim belongs more to the aspect of his father Joseph. Ephraim belongs more to his father Joseph, and less to that of Jacob. It was intended by Joseph that Ephraim should receive the blessing from the left side of Jacob. Jacob, however, crossed his hands to show that the greatness of Manasseh, who was on his right side, and Manasseh would not be a hurry, would not be quick to come. In this world, Ephraim and his descendants will be distinguished more. Ephraim will be distinguished first of all, and more so. Nevertheless, Jacob kept Ephraim on his right physically. Nevertheless, Jacob kept Manasseh on his right. Even though he put his left hand on the head of Manasseh, Manasseh was physically still on his right-hand side. He crossed his hands over, but did not change the position of the boys standing before him. For him, Manasseh is destined to complete the glory of Jacob in building the third temple. Manasseh is destined to be instrumental in rebuilding the third temple. That is what it says. Manasseh is destined to complete the glory of Jacob in building the third temple. We also have other sources that have a similar message, at least concerning Joseph in general, rebuilding the third temple. It says that in Malachi 3:1 that he will send his messenger before him to prepare the way and rebuild the temple. Rabbi Sadia got on in about 800 CE, and Ibn Ezra in 1080. 1164, the very Bible said that the messenger mentioned here by Malachi is the Messiah son of Joseph. The Messiah son of Joseph, according to the Malbim and others, will be the future head of those 10 tribes when they return and reunite with Judah. The Midrash Pesikta Zutrata, the Midrash Pesikta Zutrata, Leketov Balak, Numbers 224:17, says that the Messiah son of Joseph will rebuild the temple. So there we have it. We can look forward to it, and we could study the sources to see the significance of this. The 10 tribes will reunite with Judah, and the third temple will be rebuilt, especially through the instrumentation of Joseph, and apparently within Joseph of Manasseh. And we identify Joseph with the Anglo-Saxon English-speaking peoples mainly, and we find a predominance of the powers of Ephraim in the English and the British peoples and the offshoots, whereas Manasseh finds it has given expression more to those Israelites now in the USA. Thank you. May the Lord God of Israel bless you.